In 2019, a survey by the BCRTA, undertaken by our executive director, Tim Anderson, showed that volunteering was an important aspect of the lives of many of our members. Teachers bring an awful lot of skills and an awful lot of experience to volunteering. They are in demand. A rough estimate of the total unpaid hours, volunteer hours by our members came to a conservative value of $50 million a year. Impressive and helpful to our society. However, after COVID lockdowns, many of those links have been diminished. And with those changes, there's been a loss of benefits not only to the activities that the volunteers enjoyed, but also that they offered to their communities. We also have to remember that all of the BCRTA's 48 branches are led by volunteers. How can we be most effective in developing leaders in our own organization and making it a positive experience for everyone? Taking a look at volunteering isn't a bad thing to consider, and I would say we're delighted at this time to take a closer look at volunteering. We welcome two presenters on this topic, courtesy of the organization Volunteer BC and their own organization, Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives. Here we are to welcome Jocelyn Wong and Jennifer DeWolf on volunteering.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Jocelyn, and I wanted to start off the morning by saying that I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Tsawwassen, and the Kwantlen people. So our office is located in what's called Richmond. So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here today. We are having a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm hoping everything works out well. But my name is, again, Jocelyn. I'm here to talk a little bit about trends in volunteering, as I know that everyone around the room knows the concept of volunteering, and that all of you actually volunteer in high volumes in across BC. And so this is us, and that's kind of, as I mentioned, that's where we're located. And so I'm going to just start off by giving you a little bit of a background of who we are and what we do. And so our mission is to facilitate philanthropy through volunteerism and monetary donations. So it's a lot of words, but basically at the core of it, Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives kind of stands for the fact that we want to create our community where people are willing to give their time, their resources, volunteering, supporting all the local community organizations that are taking place in our community. And we want to be able to provide them with resources, not only resources for individuals such as myself who wants to go out and volunteer, but also for the nonprofit and charity community looking for resources in terms of wanting individuals to volunteer and support the work that they do. So that's kind of our mission and vision. And so we are a multi-service agency. We've been in our community for over 50 years. We celebrated our 50th year last year, so we're in our 51st year. And so we are a multi-service agency, and what that means is we provide many different resources and services in our community, one of which is our volunteer center and information center, community information center. So our volunteer center acts as our way of doing training, resources, programming, supporting, as I mentioned, nonprofit organizations who want volunteers to come in. And we talk a lot about how do you make volunteerism in your organization a great experience for everyone who joins in the work that you do. And we provide a lot of community information as well, over 600 programs, probably over 1,500 programs and services across our community. So we want to be the place where if an individual is looking for services and they don't know where to look, that they are able to come to us and we're able to help them navigate kind of what's available to them. We are the agency that runs the childcare resource and referral. And so we don't run a childcare. Sometimes people think that we run a childcare service, but we don't. What we do is we provide parents who are looking to have their children in a childcare facility within the community. And so we have our staff team and early childhood educators actually help them navigate. What does that mean? Where do you look? And we have a list of resources for all the childcare centers within our community. We also support childcare providers, so early childcare educators with training workshops and programs so that we're able to support them in the work that they do in the classroom. And a part of that is we have an early years library. And so we have a little early years library that provides childcare educators to come in and borrow material and has loose parts, has lots of books, lots of resources for young families. And it's really specific to that. Whereas our public library has everything, our early years library is really focused on that early years. We also run a small little program that's called Neighborhood Small Grants, and it is across BC. So many communities across the province actually has Neighborhood Small Grants, and it's a partnership that we have with the Vancouver Foundation as well as the Association of Neighborhood Houses of BC. And so what that is community individuals are able to apply for a small grant up to $500 in order to connect with their community. So we have a lot of individuals who work with their neighborhoods, have block parties, share in skills as well. So with a small grant, they're able to buy, say, art supplies, gardening supplies, and be able to teach their neighbors and their community some of their skills as well. And that's a way to bring people together. And then we have our Richmond Christmas Fund. And so with our Richmond Christmas Fund, it is our seasonal program, but it does utilize about 100 volunteers or so. It shrank a bit during COVID. So we're about 100 or so individuals volunteering seasonally for our Christmas Fund program. And then we have our bigger program, which is our Seniors Community Support Services. And so we run the Better at Home program here, which includes our shopping, transportation, peer counseling, as well as seniors information and referral. So we have almost 200 volunteers within the seniors department serving us. So I'm here to talk a little bit about why people volunteer and why it's so important to volunteer. I know that when I was speaking with Tim, he mentioned that that this group actually knows the concept of volunteering very, very well, and that all together you all volunteer within your communities, and we do that because we want to contribute. We also do that so that we can use our skills, and so other individuals may volunteer in order to gain experience as well. The majority of people who volunteer are often ones that have a deep connection with a particular cause that they were affected by, or that they truly believe in, or that they really want to make an impact through volunteering. Volunteering is actually very good for your health. Research has shown that, volunteering is good for your health. It increases all the happy hormones that we have, but it allows you to connect with community, knowing that you're doing something that's beneficial to them, but also is beneficial to yourself as well. And so those are all reasons why people volunteer. And I'm sure that if you're able to tell me why you volunteered. Some of those examples will probably be listed as well. And so with understanding that people want to volunteer and people do volunteer a lot within Canada and across the country and everywhere, why do some people not volunteer, or what are some trends in terms of barriers to volunteering? And so this is a statistics that we get through the Canada Survey of Giving and Volunteering and Participating. And so the number one reason is lack of time. One of the key things is I know for myself, when I volunteer or when I don't volunteer, the number one reason is because I don't have the time. And so that's really a barrier. The other barriers are around long-term commitment. So if we think a little bit about why people volunteer, a lot of times, especially for those who are retiring, they don't tend to want to just jump into something where they're asking them to volunteer for over a year and every single week. And so when an individual hears that it requires such a long-term commitment, sometimes that becomes a barrier. And because of the lack of time, a lot of individuals also indicate that they prefer to donate monetary instead of actually volunteering their time. And so while a nonprofit organization or a charity has volunteers and really requires volunteers to help us support our work, we also, of course, are very thankful for generous donations to support our programs and services. And then the other one that often why people don't volunteer is the very simple question. The very simple answer is nobody asked. Nobody asked. Some people want to give, but they don't know where to give. They don't know where to start. And usually that comes from an ask. And so the ask doesn't have to be something that's specific to an individual or a friend or somebody asking you. It can be an ask that you see out in the community. So organizations need to be able to actually have that call, have that ask in order for people to come join us. And so some of the trends that we saw during COVID in terms of volunteering is that people were still volunteering during COVID. And the majority of how people volunteered kind of shifted slightly, especially during lockdown. So things that encouraged people to volunteer during COVID were individuals who were comfortable with technology, especially since as we interact here, everything really went virtual. And so the ability to utilize technology for not only the volunteer themselves, but for organizations in order to utilize that. If that organization, that charity had that opportunity where people were able to volunteer using technology, that really increased a lot of individuals volunteering. But that also means access, right? So those individuals need to have access to the technology that's available to them. And some individuals, unfortunately, had more time. Fortunately for the organizations, they were able to see some increases in volunteers because individuals have more time. It goes back to the number one barrier of why people don't volunteer is they don't have enough time. And we definitely saw that if organizations had abilities to pivot online and do things virtually and have support of volunteers doing and supporting their work virtually, they definitely saw an increase in volunteers because people did have a little bit more time. So things that did not encourage a lot of volunteers during COVID is seniors or individuals who were over generally the age of 65. And a lot of that is tied to the comfort of being able to use technology. And then the other reason is because it was a time where to navigate how to even find volunteer opportunities that utilize virtual volunteers or being able to volunteer from home. People really did not know where those opportunities were. And it all kind of makes sense during that time frame when everyone was trying to figure out how to do their work and how to volunteer at the same time. And though some other reasons were, of course, if they had some health issues that prevented them from volunteering. Some great statistics that came from after or as we are moving out of COVID is most people want to volunteer. 80% of people indicated that as soon as they're able to, they want to return to back in person, want to be able to volunteer. And those were great signs that we saw. So some of our programs and services actually utilize volunteers in person, especially with our seniors program where we had to, where volunteers assist us with shopping for groceries for seniors who aren't able to leave their homes. We definitely had a lot of volunteers who still contributed and during that COVID period. But that also goes back to would return if they're comfortable that their health and safety was in place. And so after COVID, one of the key trends that we're seeing is a lot of volunteers want to ensure that good hygiene practices are still in place. And that they feel like they're going to be comfortable either wearing a mask if they choose to, having hand sanitizers, like personal protective equipment that's available would make them feel a lot more comfortable returning back after COVID. So who is volunteering in our country or even in our province? So one of the key things is I tend to like to talk a little bit more generationally. And so the silent generation is 32% do want to volunteer. And they definitely are our highest volunteering group. But what I am seeing within our own programs and services, a lot of them are also transitioning in becoming our clients as well. But it's a great thing in terms of it being great for their health. So I have a high population of our volunteers who do phone calling. So they would take grocery orders on the phone. And so while physically they might not be able to do the grocery shopping anymore, there are other tasks that they are able to support the work that we're doing. And they definitely do come out and support the community a lot within that generation. And then we have our baby boomers, my parents included in this category, and they want short-term flexible volunteering. And that's something that we definitely see, and it is a trend because about a decade ago, there was a lot of talk about the baby boomer generation retiring, and they would have so much time to come out into the community to help us volunteer. And what we actually saw was that, yes, they do volunteer, but they weren't coming and doing that long-term volunteering. They weren't long-term commitment in the sense of every single week coming in. What we were seeing was that they enjoy having short-term volunteering and flexible volunteering opportunities. And a lot of that has to do with, and like I said, it's my parents as well, is they support us, especially if they have grandchildren. And so they were a big part of my early childcare support. And so while they were volunteering, they needed to be flexible in their times to help out the community as well as support their children and grandchildren. And so those were some of the trends that we are seeing, and it does make sense. And then a lot of them also enjoyed traveling, and especially across our province here in that generation, we also had a lot of immigrants. And so a lot of times what we were seeing within our own volunteer pool was that they like traveling, they wanted to see the world, they are now retired and they want to go out and spend their time. But they also might still have family and relatives that aren't actually living here. And so they felt a lot of them had would return back to wherever they were from in order to support their parents or their relatives, as well as actually just seeing family and relatives that may not live in the province. And so that short-term volunteering and flexible volunteering is definitely something that we noticed, and we address it in our volunteer recruitment. Then we have our Generation X's, or what we sometimes call our sandwich generation. So they are also the same. They enjoy having wanting to give back, but they're the ones I think are the most pressed on that time. The barrier of volunteering is the fact that they don't have enough time. Most of them are still working 9 to 5. And so the opportunities for them to come out and volunteer for an organization during work hours is really hard. And so a lot of times their skills and volunteering opportunities come usually after work. They do a lot of volunteering. So for example, at their children's school, if they have children. So there are a lot of parts of sports clubs, sports teams types volunteering. So their volunteering is really geared around their family activities. Any volunteer opportunity that has them has the ability for them to volunteer together with their family and or friends are generally more positively, we see more positively. And so again, with those types of volunteering, you want to think about kind of what's available out in the community. Millennials are what we call our quick change artists. So they definitely are short-term volunteers, and they want to volunteer with their friends. They want to jump around too. And so they're the groups that really utilize volunteering as an opportunity to gain more skills and more knowledge, and also give their skills and knowledge to an organization. And as soon as they feel like they've achieved that, a lot of them would want to move on to the next thing. So for example, we've had volunteer writers before support us in writing articles. And so some of them were wanting to be journalists, some of them were just wanting to improve their writing, or some of them were actually writers themselves. And once they felt like they got us in a certain position where we either had the staffing or other resources, and they felt like, oh, you have it under control. Okay, let me go and volunteer for another organization that could use my support or my skills. And so then they like to jump around a little bit. And our Generation Zs are, most of them all have volunteered. A lot of it has to do with the school requirements during this generation's group, where youth were required to have volunteer hours and give voluntarily. We also see a lot of them volunteer because the culture of volunteering is cultivated within our school systems as well. We work with many of our schools in our district that have volunteer clubs and volunteer teams. And we definitely see that because we get a lot of phone calls from these volunteer groups saying, I'm the green team crew in our school. Where can we go together in order to volunteer? And so we try to connect them with organizations that's able to support the work that they're wanting to do. And so those are just a quick snapshot of the generational types of characteristics of people who are volunteering. And what about volunteering in Canada? And so 65% of Canadian organizations report a shortage of new volunteers. And we talk a little bit about this, mainly because, especially for a trend that I'm seeing right now, is our economy has changed, COVID has changed, and then I go back to a lot of people are working. And because of that, a lot of our programs and services in our agency require volunteers to support the work that we do during work hours. And so it is a lot harder for organizations to find volunteers. And we are seeing a trend that maybe because of COVID, not a lot of people are volunteering. And so people are slowly, hopefully coming back as well. Or sometimes they've moved on. They've moved on to do something different, right? And then 42% cannot commit to long-term roles. And so what this stat tells me is that we as organizations need to do a better job at encouraging volunteers to come join the work that we do in a different way. While we do shopping, grocery shopping, like 3 times a week, I can't ask a volunteer to commit to either every day or even once every week. I need to make it flexible. We need to find flexible ways that encourage people who can come and join the work that we do, without making it sound like, oh, that there's no way I can commit to something like that. So short-term volunteering, seasonal volunteering opportunities, and sometimes even rearranging how you talk about your programs will be helpful in that way. 35% of Canadian organizations are adapting to meet that need. And understanding these trends in volunteering is important so that we're able to see it. And maybe you are able to share a little bit of some of the things I touched on. And you might be able to say, yes, Jocelyn, like that's one of the reasons why I'm not volunteering, or it's because like I don't have enough time, or I don't want to commit to something that I don't feel like I can commit to and sign up to do something that later on I have to actually withdraw from. And that's the other thing. A lot of that's a barrier, because a lot of people who volunteer want to commit, want to do well, and know that they're actually providing key services and support within the charity that they're donating their time to. And they don't want to feel like, oh, I can't do it, and I committed to it, and then now I have to leave. And so that's not a good feeling, and that's not a good feeling I want volunteers to have either. So what can we do to encourage that not to happen? So some common places that people volunteer, this is just a quick general view, is schools, as I mentioned, community centers, parks. So in our community, and I'm sure across the province, there are gardener clubs. And so a lot of gardening clubs are all run by volunteers. And we have them around our city as well. Even community gardens are supported by volunteers that I see across our community. And so finding out whether or not they're volunteer run is a great way to start. So there's a picture in Richmond. We have the Richmond Sharing Farm, which is a nonprofit organization, and they grow food for the food bank in our community, so that the food bank has fresh vegetables. So anybody who's interested in gardening, they love to go and have volunteers come and help them prepare the plots, and then of course during harvest time come out and assist them with harvesting. Libraries, galleries, museums, theaters all still require support with volunteers. Any animal types of causes are generally always popular, especially amongst the youth. Religious sports organizations, and these are just some of the key common places that most people will look. And so some of the things to think about when you are volunteering, even if you want to volunteer as a group, because I know that that's something that is encouraged. And of course, I'm sure all of you are friends, and volunteering together is great to do it, and finding a cause that you all want to do and support. And so thinking a little bit about what is it that I enjoy doing. So I touched on the gardening, but there are many other areas that organizations are looking to support. So what do you enjoy doing? Thinking about that, and then thinking a little bit about what do you not enjoy doing. And so we have our transportation driving program, where we drive seniors to and from medical appointments. And so in the very beginning, we thought, oh, won't it be great if we can get some retired bus drivers and taxi drivers to come and help us. So we tried to recruit that type of group of people, and we got 0 people. And one of the number one things that I learned from that experience is sometimes some individuals don't want to do what they normally did as their career. And we see that in, say, cooks as well, or sometimes marketing and digital individuals. Sometimes people volunteer in order to do something different. Sometimes people volunteer because they are very good at it, and you get both. So you just never know. But what is it that you don't enjoy doing, so that you're not going in and thinking, oh, this is definitely not what I want to do or what I want to sign up for. So what skills do you have to share? And also think a little bit about what skills potentially you might want to gain. And so I've had some volunteers where we do public speaking, and during interviews, I would sit down with them, and they're very shy, and I go through and talk to them a little bit about understanding the position that they will be out in public, they will need to interact with people, they'll need to be able to present. How are they feeling about that? And a lot of times they'll say that's an area that they actually want to increase their skill sets on. And I think that's fantastic. And that's why we have programs and services that support people, not only for them to give their skills, but also ones where we help support developing their skills. And so thinking a little bit about all those things, so those questions, and how many hours are you able to do? One of the key things is going into an organization and letting them know what are you able to give. So sometimes you might see an ask, a volunteer position, or somebody asking you to volunteer, and it might be a cause that you believe strongly in and you do want to volunteer, but being honest about how much time you're able to give. And so I have some volunteers that started in the interview session that we have. She told me right off the bat that she takes off 2 months a year to go traveling. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. So during those 2 months, we know she won't be volunteering with us. Right. So understanding kind of between the organization and yourself, of what are you looking for? And that just encourages success and support and all around for not only yourself, but for the agency as well. So when you're focusing on your search, then you might be thinking, well, what do I look for? Asking yourself, do you like working with people, or do you like to be alone? And is it a time for you to just focus on yourself? We have a volunteer that helps us make handmade thank you cards. And so that's a very specific thing for that individual to do at home. And so they're able to just be by themselves and do something that they enjoy, which is crafts. And so thinking about what those might look like. And do you like to be in charge, being a team leader? And so kind of thinking about those things, because that will help you in your search. It will also help you if you don't notice any of these things, but you have an agency that you want to volunteer for their cause and support. I would always say, go and approach them and let them know that I want to volunteer for your organization. I haven't seen a volunteer position that quite fits me. Can we have a chat about what it is that I can potentially support your agency in? And those conversations are always welcomed for most organizations. I can't anticipate anyone saying no to somebody walking through their door wanting to give their time. Okay, so ways to get started then. So that question around, well, nobody asked me, or I didn't know where to look, or I didn't know where I can go. These are some of the things to think about. So if you have a local volunteer center in your community, they're probably the greatest place to start, because they're the ones who work with other community organizations in order to know kind of what they're looking for as well. So that's a great place to start. And also looking at whether or not there's a local chapter of a cause that's very specific to you. So heart and stroke is a great example, though they're generally ones that people might gravitate towards. So thinking a little bit about organizations that are more province-wide and may have local offices within the communities. I hope I'll be able to show you a couple of online databases. Volunteer Now is it's the volunteer database that what we call our volunteer database. And so through our database, you're able to see all the volunteer opportunities that are available in our community. Not all, but a lot of them. And then you have the Volunteer BC one as well, which also utilizes our database. And you have Charity Village, I Volunteer, sometimes Craigslist will have a couple of volunteer postings as well. And then training and resources. So we provide organizations with great training and resources, training opportunities to make sure that their volunteer programs has a strong foundation to welcome volunteers in. I know for myself that when I go volunteering, if I walk in and I say I'm here to volunteer, but nobody quite knows what to do with me, it kind of doesn't encourage me to come back. And so we want organizations to be successful in having great volunteer opportunities so that people want to come back and support the work that they do. So not sure where to start. So that's a screenshot of our volunteer database. And so as you can see, we built the database ourselves with volunteer users in mind. And so one of the key things that we decided was that a lot of times people go directly to things that they care about. And so on this left-hand column here, you'll be able to see all the different types of causes. So you're able to click on the cause and then it will populate on the right side. And so it also has on the top, do you want board positions, leadership types of positions where they can practice their English, or do you want to focus on virtual positions as well? So that's our database, that's how it looks. And so because we built this database, we've also supported some other volunteer centers to utilize the shell of our database. I'm not technical, as you can tell. And so Volunteer BC will have a very similar look to us. Volunteer Terrace will, Volunteer Burnaby, North Shore Community Resource Services, and I believe also Coquitlam utilizes our database setup the way it's designed here that you can see. So when you go to any of those, you will see something very similar. And so this is the Volunteer BC one. So the Volunteer BC is very unique in the sense that another trend that we have been seeing is slowly local volunteer centers and the roles that they play have slowly started to shift. So some communities, especially smaller ones, might not have a volunteer center anymore, but some organization may take on the role of a volunteer center. And so those communities, individuals will have to go to in order to find the volunteer opportunities. But Volunteer BC, as I mentioned, they do have a similar look to us because they are using our database. They're more around the province of BC. So they're trying to support the province, especially in rural areas that may not have an actual volunteer center, so that they're able to actually utilize the database and post volunteer opportunities so that people are able to see it. So it's a great resource to have, especially if you are in the interior parts of British Columbia. And so here are some of the volunteer centers in BC, and as you can see, I'm sure hopefully one is close by to where you are. And if you don't see one in your community, you as a group can definitely decide on how you want to give your time. Maybe get a couple of friends together and find out what the need in your community is and go to that charity or that nonprofit organization together. Maybe it's a local food bank and say, how can we together as a team volunteer and support the work that you do? It's important to have a good volunteer program, we believe, mainly because it's valuable. you as a volunteer will feel like your time was valuable. You're able to see how your work connects to the community. It's also great for retention, right? So that's why it's important for organizations to understand why people volunteer, what brought them through their doors, in order to also ensure that they want to continue to stay and they want to continue to give their time. So I know I can chat about this like all day. So any questions that anybody might have for me?
Very informative. Why volunteer, how to volunteer, where to volunteer. The breadth of it was quite expansive and wonderful for us to listen to. I'd like to thank you, Jocelyn, and Jennifer in the background. I'm sorry you had a little glitch there, but that's fine. I do have some questions from the observers. First of all, sometimes participation falters and goes down in an organization. So have you got a suggestion or two how you keep the interest of volunteers up so they stay with it?
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, it's always the connection. So we're so thankful for our volunteers. And a great example is our office volunteer. So our office volunteer, especially during this time of year when we start doing our mail out campaign, are doing tasks that sometimes doesn't seem like it's very interesting. So for example, helping us put labels on envelopes, helping us print all of our registration forms, folding our brochures. And so one of the key things that we do is we never lose sight of why they're doing the volunteer work that they're doing. We stay communicated with them. We let them know that, oh, look, this mail campaign this year helped us generate $1,000 or whatever that amount is. So we share in the success of the work and their output. And I think that's key for anything that volunteers do and keeps interest high. I have another quick example is one of our grocery delivery volunteer drivers. He came back to us one day and he told us that it just after a couple of deliveries to this one senior, he came back and he told us that he was amazed at the fact that he was the only person that this senior sees each and every week. It's the only human contact this senior has. And I think that those are the stories we definitely want to tell, is that your time, your effort is meaningful, and we need to make sure we're constantly telling volunteers that if you and same with our grocery shoppers, you know, it's like they shopped 43 grocery orders in one day. Like that's 43 shopping orders that seniors got. And I think being passionate about your job and the work that you do also helps contribute to volunteers understanding the motivation of why they're there and why they're needed.
Those are excellent suggestions. Your passion transfers, reassuring people what they do is valuable transfers. So on the downside here for a minute, one question is, can you fire a bad volunteer?
So I always say that, you know, you are volunteering. If it's not a good fit for the agency, then yes, you are able to fire a volunteer. The thing is, ethically, I think you need to have a conversation just like anywhere else, the reason why it's not a good fit. So legally, you're not obligated, but ethically, I think, and human-wise, I think you really should. If it's not working, if there's boundaries that are broken and or if there's unsafe practices, then definitely we try our best to try and support the volunteer and retrain, because a lot of times it's likely coming from a place of care, but understanding that we are still a program acting within the community and serving oftentimes the vulnerable population. So it's important that you know, conversations are said. And if it just isn't a good fit, it's not a good fit.
Gentle dismissal with a good rationale and opportunity. Good, thank you. Another problem that often is considered and not really clear with people, maybe you could help with this. You like to have volunteers more involved, but often you raise that question, what about legal liability? Being a volunteer and liability.
Yes, so the agency should have insurance anytime that like with volunteering programs. And so we definitely have some, but you need to be able to understand your board of directors has a legal responsibility and obligation, and any kind of insurance should include volunteers as well.
One last question, if I might. It was really quite interesting. He said, with new volunteers often being connected to someone already involved in the organization seems pretty important, you know, so you feel welcome as a volunteer. What sort of strategies can you think of to build those relationships?
The volunteer is the key. So they're the ones who have that first interaction with them. It has to come from the top down, from the whole agency. It can't just be from one program. The whole agency needs to be supportive of having volunteers support the work that they do. And that's the warm and welcoming situation. We do a great orientation and training for all volunteers in order to welcome them into the agency and get a sense of the whole agency.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, that's the questions I'd like to ask now. There may be more coming, and certainly we'll pass them on to you, and you have an opportunity to answer them. I must say, you know, teachers are natural volunteers. I'm sure you know there are many teachers involved in your organization, and thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. You guys enjoy the rest of your day and continue learning. Thank you.